All right, hey everyone. This is our first episode of Team Perks, and I'm here with John Camardo and Pastor Jerry, and we're packed in like sardines behind the counter of Stir, specifically because the background is cool and it fits the theme. So we're going to dive in today to why teams matter and hear from Pastor Jerry about interdependence and things along those lines. So let's get started.
Hey John, how are you?
Doing? Good. How
Good.
are you? Oh, you got another.
Huh?
Nice and close.
Oh, this is lovely.
How you doing, guys?
Good, John. Well, it's good.
You guys have been on a team for a long time together, haven't you?
It's almost 7 years.
A couple of years?
7.
Well, even before that, Joe, you've been on the you've been volunteering with Deone for
many years before that.
like 50, right? 50 years?
At least, it seems that way.
Joe, in all the years you've served with Pastor Deone, there must be some questions you'd like to ask him that you've never asked him before. Do you have any?
Oh, I sure do. How about your favorite staff member?
Whew. There's like over 100 people working, right?
That's right.
I think the right answer is probably my wife. I'm going to go with my wife. My wife's my favorite.
All right, how about your second favorite?
Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan I think would be my second favorite.
Yeah.
I like John Cook here too, and then there's John Camardo, and you can't get wrong if you mention John. So
Was that fishing, Joe? Were you fishing for an
yeah, I
answer
think
there?
you're fishing. I'm not. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. Well, I've got
Joe, you're at least in the top 100.
All right,
at
that's
least.
great. You got to tell me, what's your favorite book in the Bible?
Oh, probably Philippians. Philippians, because it talks about joy and it talks about the presence of Christ, and Paul realized that to a great degree, what it meant to know Christ, even as we've studied the last couple weeks, and to really experience the joy that's found in Christ. Absolutely, Philippians.
Who is your favorite preacher?
Besides me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yes,
besides me. Okay. Being serious, I've been in a lot of places, heard a lot of people speak. Jerry Gillis is the best communicator of the gospel I've ever heard in my life. Really.
Oh, that's
Jerry.
great. Now I'm going to really put you on the spot.
Okay.
Who's your least favorite staff member?
So the first question that we had was, so obviously there's a lot written on the value of team and shared ownership of mission in any organization. But as a team here, we say interdependence is of great value. Why is that so important for us to embrace?
Well, I mean, there's a pragmatic side to it, right? I mean, so you've got the pragmatic idea of we're better together. But it's really, pragmatic is not really what I'm too interested in. I think maybe it's that if God himself operates in interdependence as Father, Son, and Spirit, and if he's created his church to operate in interdependence where every person has a part to play and a role in the body, then why wouldn't we as a church organization actually operate that way?
Yeah, makes sense. Jerry, I know you've talked a little bit about previous staff cultures you've experienced. I'd like to know why ours is the best. No, I'm just kidding. Help us understand kind of what you've learned in that process, and maybe specifically what makes interdependence kind of a key ingredient to a healthy staff culture.
Yeah. So I've been on, this would be my third staff culture in which I've been employed, but I've been around a lot of them.
Right.
And so it's not so much, there's always, every culture has its own kind of identity a little bit. And so I've seen a lot of health in the ones that I came from. And I've also seen some things that I thought, might be helpful to change or to tweak. For one, even as it relates maybe to even this staff culture from years and years ago, if there's a singular leader and everything kind of gets swallowed in that single vortex, you've just really limited the scale upon which you can do ministry, and that's not a good deal. We don't want this congregation to simply live out my strengths and die the death of my weaknesses. That's not ideal for anybody, because the days of Moses on the mountain are long gone. This is about a body of people working together. Yes, there's some people that are called to directionally lead and provide some spiritual authority and those kinds of things, but to do so in a manner that is for the benefit of everyone. So looking at it from a staff culture standpoint, that's just what we're trying to embrace, and I've been able to learn strengths of that from different places, and I've also observed some weaknesses in the past in other places as well, including our own, which we want to continue to tweak and to get better at as well.
Right. So we define team here as essentially there's a group of people that are coming together for a defined and common purpose. They can only be accomplished by the full engagement of all of those individuals. How does that end up affecting us as a team? How does that have an individual impact for each of us?
Well, if every individual recognizes that they have a responsibility to a greater group, that makes a difference, I think, in the way that each of us operate. In other words, I don't do what I do in a vacuum. There are some things that I do that I'm kind of tasked to do, and I've got that kind of responsibility. But I don't do what I do in a vacuum. What I do affects what you do. It affects what you do. And by the way, what you guys do affects what I do. And so we have to understand that and to be able to think kind of with an others orientation, because in some cultures what can happen is you've got your defined thing that you do, and then all you do is talk about that thing, and that's what you do because that's your job. Everybody stay away, you're the expert, you're the only one that knows how to do this job. And then it becomes a silo into which only you live, and nobody else can ever feed in or feed back or any of those kinds of things. And it can become ingrown, unaccountable, and all of the things that really make for sickness in an organizational culture. What team does is it brings the idea, particularly interdependence in team, it brings the idea of health and accountability and mutual strengths and sharpening of one another. It highlights relationship, it cares about other people, it's others-centered. All of these things are really important for the idea of health in an organization, and truthfully for them to grow to kind of the heights and the capacity that we really want to grow into.
Two quick things that come into mind when you think about that. One is how would someone on a staff team safeguard themselves from building that silo? What are some things they could do to actions they could take, ways they could think that would keep them from building their personal silo? And maybe also along those lines, to someone that would say, interdependence sounds great in theory, but I got a job to do. I can't be doing everybody else's job, I got to do my job. How do people safeguard themselves from those things?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things related to that. One, let me start on the back end there. For somebody who would say, I've got a job to do, they're right about that. We do have people on this team, and you have a job to do. And if you don't do it well, then, that's a problem, right? We have to do our jobs well. That's a part of what we're compensated by this body of believers to not just do our job, but to do our job well. Just because we do our job well doesn't mean we should get anything additional. The expectation is that we do our job well. That's who we are supposed to be. So yes, that's true. We are to do our job well. And if you're asking the question, well, I can't do everybody else's job for them, well, that's true too. And that means if there's team members that aren't pulling their weight or whatever, if you are interdependent, then you can help one another in that regard, and that's where accountable conversations come into play. That's where trying to help others in that role, but then being able to say, hey, look, here's the deal. You've got to carry your weight too. These are the conversations you can have. You don't have those conversations when you're siloed. Only one person can have that conversation with everybody. If it's usually just like a single leader, and then that single leader finally has to say into that silo, hey, you're not doing the job you're supposed to be doing. This is different in that we can speak into one another's lives relationally to be able to help one another do that. One of the ways that you work against kind of being siloed and kind of on your own is to intentionally and affirmatively engage other people in areas that you need to. Listen, I realize on our team, all of you who are watching, not everybody has the same level of interaction with a broad number of people. I totally get that. And it's not as if we're saying that you have to do that to the detriment of your job. Everybody's job's a little bit different. We understand that. But when it comes to engagement, for one, how about at a staff lunch? Why don't you stop sitting with the same people you work with every single second? Just a heads up, I'll see if it works next staff lunch. It's a smart thing to do, kind of to rotate around and maybe sit with people you don't normally engage with, sit with people you don't normally work with. You get an opportunity at that point to eat a meal with somebody, to be relationally connected to somebody. Maybe something, comes off in your mind and you're going, hey, you know what? I haven't thought about this, but with me doing this and you doing this, we should talk about blank. that we think would be beneficial, right? You have to put yourself into some of those positions without taking away from doing your job. You have to put yourself in some of those positions to be able to see that really happen.
That's great.
Good. Is there anything else that you want to share with us in response to that question? Why team?
Yeah, I mean, again, pragmatically, it's a great idea. It's a better idea. We can accomplish more together than we can accomplish on our own. This isn't about the glorification of single individuals. We're about the glorification of Jesus. That's really the goal of what we're trying to do as an organization. And how do we do that? We do that best when everybody is playing their part, doing their job well, but doing that together as needed, in a way that is kind of, not so self-centered, but is other-centered in the way that we're doing what we're doing, an appreciation for other people who are helping you do the job that you're doing. I know from time to time, sometimes it's at a holiday because everybody's going to be taking a break or whatever, I'll shoot out a note on the iChapel to basically say, look, I know that I can't do what I do unless you do what you do. I get it. And the truth is, there's something to be said of, you can't do what you do unless I'm doing what I'm doing, right? This is a part of who we are, and we have to recognize that in one another. And again, for me, this is theological. It's centered on biblical conviction. God as Father, Son, and Spirit has, since eternity past, lived in this communal, life-giving circle of love, so to speak, a dance, as C.S. Lewis called it, with Father, Son, and Spirit that has always existed. We've been invited into that. The beautiful thing about that is that that's how the church is actually designed to function and to operate. There's one head, the Lord Jesus Christ, and then there's a body. Of course, the head is attached to the body, and we are to operate in this interdependence, this intimacy with the head, but every part doing its part. So for me, this is a theological conviction, this is a biblical conviction, and churches ought to model biblical theology even in their organizational structures. And so as best we can, we're trying to do that. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have to give directional leadership and that that there need to be team leaders doing what they're doing. All of those things are true. We need that from an organizational standpoint. We're organizing around the mission of what God's called us to do. But we're doing that with a heartbeat that is interdependent and servant leadership driven and others focused, because this is fundamentally what it means to be a Christian. See, what happens sometimes in organizations, particularly Christian organizations as they get bigger, people start to think too much in terms of title, and they start to think too much in terms of position and posture and those kinds of things, when really a Christian organization ought to be thinking about the glory of Jesus and the good of other people, even when it comes to our work life, because that's what makes us who we are as the people of Jesus. So that's just another ad that I have, along with reminding you, next staff lunch, sit with some other people.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sure.